Let's take a minute and thank our sponsors for helping grow this podcast to bigger and better every episode. Our first one is SR3 ResQ Concepts, because you don't know what you don't know. Our next one is Life Saving Systems Corporation. We do our work so you can do yours. Tough gear for tough jobs. Breeze Eastern, the world's only dedicated helicopter hoist and winch provider. And Flippin' Coffee, brewing real coffee with real ingredients for real coffee drinkers. SR3 ResQ Concepts is a training company that can help with your helicopter training, standardization, and safety checks. Or maybe just an annual FAA refresher is what you need. They're ready to help your agency keep up to date with current techniques, rules, regulations, and equipment. The training staff is amazing, with certified flight instructor pilots and experienced crew members that are offering training in rescue, medical, tactical, firefighting, and ground operations. SR3 has partnered with Petzl to assist with a personal protective equipment inspection course and the highly specific Lizard, which is used for helicopter cliff and mountain rescue. And to add into it, they also teach ground, tactical, emergency care. Contact them today at sr3rescueconcepts.com. Again, sr3rescueconcepts.com, or follow them on Instagram at sr3_rescue. That's sr3_rescue. Then we have Life Saving Systems Corporation. Manufactures the world's toughest helicopter rescue gear. From their Triton harness, which is my favorite harness being a rescueman, to the rescue basket, litters, and of course the most popular hoist hook in helicopters, yes, the D-Lock. The team at LSC cuts, bends, sews, welds, and machines these products into existence every day and sends them on their way to us. We do our work so that you can do yours. LSC, tough gear for tough jobs. Check them out at lifesavingsystems.com. That's lifesavingsystems.com. And follow them over on Instagram at ResQGear. That's at ResQ Gear. Next is Breeze Eastern. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and unique mission requirements has changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, operators, and those rescued has not. Contact Breeze Eastern today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. That's breeze-eastern.com. And the last one is Flippin' Coffee. At Flippin' Coffee, we roast each batch to perfection to bring that smooth, delicious cup of coffee that you won't find in most other brands. We like to keep it simple, brewing real coffee using real ingredients for real coffee drinkers. Contact them today at flippincoffee.com. That's FLIPPIN coffee.com. You can also follow them on Instagram at Flippin' Coffee. That's at FLIPPIN coffee. As a bonus, Flippin' Coffee is given a promotion. If you punch in promotion code, all capitals, REALRESQ, you get 10% off. That's promo code Real ResQ, capitals, all capitals, REALRESQ, and you get 10%. If you're just going to send everybody an email, just make sure you tell them one thing. Quinny sent me here. And thank you to all of our sponsors. My next guest is coming from Austin, Texas. And what a great conversation I had with him. He goes into some good rescues, some techniques, some different things that they do down there. And he brought in a little reality check that needs to be done with a good bunch of lessons learned. And I was humbled by it, and I'm excited to share it with you guys. So without further ado, please welcome Steph Maier. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real ResQ Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my next guest, Mr. Steph Maier, flying with STARFlight out of Travis County, Austin, Texas. What's up, Mr. Steph? How are you today, buddy?
Not much, man. How are you? It's good to see you again.
Dude, good to see you too, man. Good to see you too. Thanks for coming on to the Real ResQ podcast with me, brother.
Oh, no, good. I'm glad to do it, man. I'm excited.
Yeah,
I think we're going to get into some good stuff today.
Oh, we are, definitely. And, you and I have gone, well, we just taught a class together, which was super fun. And just getting to hang around helicopters, man. Like we just have fun. It's awesome.
Yeah. How can you have a bad day at work when you're doing that? Like at the end of the day, like I always think like, there's probably a worse job I could be doing.
Right? Could be stuck behind a desk or a computer. Wait a minute. What are we doing right now?
Yeah. Like, wait a minute. Yesterday I was flying around in a helicopter. I better not complain.
Oh my gosh. I love it. Well, Steph, if you would be so kind, please just kind of introduce yourself to everybody. Feel free to just give a little bit of information about who you are and then how you got into search and rescue.
All right, yeah. So, like you said, I work for Travis County STARFlight in Austin, Texas. That's the early morning getting to me. And I've worked there for almost 22 years now.
Nice.
I was on a ground ambulance before then. I started in 95 with Austin Travis County EMS at the time, and was a ground ambulance guy. I was a BLS provider for a while, and they started up. Originally, the rescue team was all paramedics, and so I couldn't be on it because I was on a BLS truck. But then they decided that they wanted to kind of expand their capabilities and have the ability to deliver rescue care faster. And so they knew they had all these EMTs, and we were all young at the time. Like, when I think back of how young I was, right? I was like 21, 22 right? years old. Yeah. And they were like, hey, you want to, drive fast in an ambulance and then hang off of ropes and maybe one day be on a helicopter. I was like, that sounds good to me. I'm in. Like, and we might pay you a little extra. And I was like, oh yeah, even better. I was like,
awesome.
Yeah. Like, So I was on a ground-based special operations rescue team for a while. As a training officer with them for a little while. And then in 99, the spot opened up on the helicopter, and I, threw my hat in the ring, took my chances, and was fortunate enough to be selected. And the rest is kind of history. I've been there ever since. So flight That's paramedic. Awesome. Yeah. Flight paramedic, hoist operator, still a part-time kind of rescue swimmer, but as I get older, I find that I'm probably a little better off running the hoist than being on the end of it. So,
oh, that's hilarious! I love it. So, for clarification wise, just for everybody out there and all our listeners, your rescue swimmer training is a little bit different than ours as far as Coast Guard wise, but you guys do a lot more like swift water stuff. So you're put into swift water, and you're also more of a rescueman on the hook. So you go down to land, building tops, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. So, we say rescue swimmer here, and it's probably more of a hybrid, like swiftwater rescue technician kind of a thing than it is like the Coast Guard rescue swimmer or somewhere else. I think that just kind of becomes like in the United States where crew chief no longer means you turn wrenches on a helicopter for a lot of programs.
Agreed.
You're the hoist operator or something like that. And so that's just a term we use. But where we live in Central Texas is kind of it's commonly known as flash flood alley. There's some geography there that makes it really prone to flash floods. And Texas, that part of Texas kind of has two monsoon type seasons in the fall and the spring, where we get, these cold fronts or weather systems that move through and dump a ton of rain in a very short period of time. And so, these dry creek beds or these barely trickling creeks kind of all of a sudden go from no water to, over the low water crossing above the bridge, and people, aren't paying attention, or they think their car is big and they drive through it. And, we get called to find them, either still stuck on the roof of their car or, clinging to a tree. So that's kind of our, if we had to say specialty, I'd say that's our specialty. That's our bread and butter there is swift water work. In between there, we do there's some land-based rescue and SAR in there. People go out and, the state parks, or Texas is a big place. There's a lot of open area. And so people go out and get hurt. And so we do some land-based rescue and stuff like that. But I'd say overwhelmingly where we really get the most bang for our buck is in the swiftwater environment.
Nice. And there's a lot of technical work when it comes to helicopter rescue in swiftwater because, in one aspect, you are sitting in a hover, which is totally fine. But as soon as you as a rescuer get in the water, now you've got this rushing water and you're almost angled at like a 45-degree or worse angle, trying to attach somebody to a quick strap, a capture strap, something to get them out of that area and then get them to dry land. Or you end up chasing them. So now your helicopter pilot's doing this like weaving with the river, following the river, watching out for power lines. And there's so many technical things that go on with river rescue that people they look at, we can do that. Well, it's a little more complicated than just, we're going to go pick somebody out of a river. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they're stationary on the roof of their car, then, it's not, it can be challenging, but you think about that, it's a static problem. But, right. If somebody's clinging onto a tree in the water and you've got, all this rushing water, it's, as they say in swiftwater, it's powerful, it's predictable, but it's relentless. So, the water, it's not like, I guess, for you guys at the ocean where, there's a set of waves and then it's kind of a lull for a second. And you can do stuff. Most of our floods, however fast the water's moving, it's just constant until it runs out of water. You've got that much force pushing you, right? And so until the creek goes dry, you've got, however much water pushing down on you. And so it can be really challenging, especially like you said, if, we're not on our game or we misread the situation. Maybe somebody's finally so cold and hypothermic that they just can't hold on anymore. And they start moving down the river. Now, then it gets real technical real fast. And, and if you're not prepared for that, if you haven't thought about it or planned for it or trained for it, then, you can get not only, the victim can get in a bad spot, but you can get the rescuer and then subsequently or potentially even the aircraft in a bad spot. If you get, your hoist operator's not managing the cable well, and there's trees and cars and who knows what else floating down the river. And now you got that wrapped up in the cable. And now I got my rescuer is, tied to this tree that's wrapped around the cable that's now pulling on the aircraft. Like, you can have a bad day pretty quick.
Pretty quick.
Yeah.
No doubt. Damn. Gosh, that's pretty gnarly. And Well, all right. So now with that, let's go into your very first SAR case. So, and I know you're a paramedic. You're a street paramedic for a while, and you and I just had this conversation about, hey, let me tell you my first paramedic story, but you don't even remember. Could have been a stump.
Yeah.
So
it was hard. I tried to remember the first SAR case when I was on the spec ops team on the ground-based stuff, and I can't remember that. But the two most memorable, I suppose, or the one most memorable blends together because I was still on a ground ambulance. And it was my first helicopter rescue. So I remember I was working out of the station that was out at Lake Travis. At the time, I think it was called Med Rescue 16. I think it's still Med Rescue 16. But, it's been a hot minute since I worked there, almost 3 decades. So, and we get called out for a woman who broke her ankle, and it comes in as a high angle rescue. And so, all right. And so we go out. And I'm working with a partner whose name escapes me at the moment. And we go up and they dispatch us this road and they go up there and it's a house on a hill. And we're like, okay. And they're like, oh, she's down, in the backyard. All right, no big deal. And so we walk over there thinking oh, she just, fell in the backyard. And somehow I got coded as a rescue because somebody said, oh, she's in this. And so they lead us to this little trail and the husband or somebody points down the trail. And we're like, okay. And so we start walking down the trail. And then I'm starting to think, this is starting to get a little more challenging everywhere we go. Like, this is going to be, we're going to have to, this is going to be a, thank God the fire department's here, and this stuff, because we're going to have to carry this lady out. And we kept going, and it's twilight, and we keep going. And it's, if anybody's ever been to Austin, they're familiar with the restaurant, the Oasis. It was near there. And so it's this overlook, and then it's probably 200 or 300 foot of, I don't know, pretty significant loose rock kind of slope through cedar trees all the way down to the river's edge or the lake's edge. And she had made her way about 90% of the way to the thing. So it's dark and it's starting to get dark. And so we're all huddled around and we get our legs splinted up and back in the day, we gave morphine for pain. So give her some morphine for pain.
Nice.
And we're sitting there and we're like, well, what do we do? And we're all looking at like, man, it's going to take us forever we're going to have to build like, a haul system and carry her up and then stop and then reset another one. And finally, we all kind of looked at it and we said, hey, maybe we ought to just use the helicopter. Maybe it's just that easy. Let's just do that. So, we didn't do a lot. So, we're
just that easy. That's what
yeah,
I'm talking about.
I say that now, but at the time, man, we had 2 paramedics. I think we had sweat and we were more worried about, we're going to call the helicopter and we're going to get in trouble for calling the helicopter. Like, this is going to be terrible. But we did. And so, it worked out pretty well. We got our package in the Stokes, got everything going. And then I remember there was this moment where my partner and I are looking at each other and it was all right, well, who's going to go out with her? Who's going to ride the basket? And back then we didn't have a hoist. We were, the STARFlight was using a 412 at the time. So it was a short haul program back then. This is, we're probably talking
nice.
97 here.
Okay.
And so short haul. So they're going to short haul over to the parking lot of this other thing, set her down, and we'll figure out how we're going to get her to the hospital from there. And I remember my partner and I kind of look at each other like, do you want to go? Do you want to go? With both of us knowing full well that we wanted to go. And so after a few seconds of kind of this, well, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? I finally made the executive decision. I was like, well, I'm writing the chart. So I'm going out with the helicopter.
Yeah. Come on, Steph.
So I think, probably to this day, he probably looks back at that and probably, has some choice words for me. So, they came in and it was 2 good friends of mine. The pilot was Willie Culberson, and the crew chief that day was Jim Allday. And they lowered the rope down to me, and we hooked up the bag and we lifted her up. And my biggest regret to this day, or I think back on it, is that this was back in so this was in the days before everybody in the world had some sort of video recording device. So here's this great, like, the helicopter lifts us off, the sun's setting, we go out over the lake and all this. And I'm like, where's the video of that? Like, how come I can't have a video of that? So in the end, we land, we set her in the parking lot, and it all goes pretty well. And the good folks on the helicopter were nice enough to go ahead and just take her to the hospital. So we didn't have to, as we were cleaning up all our gear, and didn't have to drive into the hospital and stuff like that. And then I got to sit around for the rest of the day and feel like I was king of the world, because I had just gotten, I'd done it in training a few times and stuff, but I'm doing it for real. And I felt like I was the man at that point.
Dude, that's awesome. What a great first story. What a great first rescue, especially with helicopter stuff, man. That's killer.
Yeah, it was. And so that kind of, from there, I think I was kind of, at that point I was hooked. Like, the helicopter stuff was fun. I was like, man, people really get to do this? Like, I'm in. Like, how do I, sign me up?
Man, great story, dude. Oh, that's killer. I love it. That's awesome. Well,
I think go sorry, man. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, like, I think the funny thing is that, I kind of got into search and rescue. I won't say by accident. When I finished paramedic school, I took a swiftwater rescue course down in New Braunfels, and it was fun, and I kind of enjoyed it. And then, like I said, when I was still driving a ground ambulance, they invited some of us BLS providers to join the rescue team and do all this. But I'd been exposed to it at a much earlier age, because oddly enough, I am the second generation working on STARFlight. So my mom worked for the same program that I do back when I was in high school. So all these people
that's
so it's kind
great.
of like a friend of mine wrote a book called Life in the Dead Man's Curve. It's a shameless plug for his book. And he talks about how when I was in high school, I would come up to the station to visit my mom when she was working on the helicopter. And he refers to me, I think, then as a punk kid. In the book, he lies. He says I had purple hair at the time. That's absolutely not true. It was blue. It's interesting. So
that's great.
After I kind of got established in my career and stuff, my mom moved on. She left the helicopter and she went on to be a traveling nurse and stuff. But I ended up working with all these people that had worked with my mom. And so it was kind of entertaining, because I think at times, anytime maybe my ego got too big because I was on the helicopter, something like that, the people who had worked with her, worked with me, were no shortage of, not at all upset to remind me of the things I did and how I looked when I was, 17 years old or 16 years old, coming up to the station with, purple or blue hair at the time and all this other stuff. So it was always kind of an ego check to have some guys like, yeah, you remember when you got, your mom had to come bail you out because you got in trouble for, doing this. And I was like, oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah, we remember that too. God. And I'm like, oh, thanks, guys. So
totally called out. That's awesome.
It's always kind of been an ego check for a while. Now it's been so long that most of the people there don't remember working with her. They don't know that. And so I kind of keep it quiet up until telling
now.
your audience now this is what happened to me, right? But I had managed to keep it kind of quiet. In fact, I told people the other day at work, they're like, what, your mom worked here? And I was like, yeah, you didn't know that? And they're like, no, we had no idea. And I was like, yeah, I keep it kind of quiet because people will just pick on me. So
yeah, it's gonna come around.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
That's awesome. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's. I want to get into a couple of different rescues that you had, and two of which you specifically earned a couple awards for. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of read them, and then I would love for you to kind of take me through a little bit of each of the rescues. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. Well, this one, so 2014 Higgins and Langley Memorial Award for Outstanding Achievement in the Field of Swift Water Rescue is hereby presented to Steph Maier, flight paramedic, rescue swimmer, hoist operator. This is dated June 6, 2014. In honor of your personal service and the commitment by Travis County STARFlight to the highest standards of swiftwater and flood rescue training, preparedness, and professionalism and devotion, which accumulated in the technically challenging rescues of 32 victims who were swept away, surrounded, or stranded by dangerous floodwaters generated by the severe thunderstorms on October 30 and 31 of 2013. Without the Travis County STARFlight robust swiftwater rescue program, countless lives would have surely been lost in these devastating storms. Steph, that's awesome. 32 lives or 32 victims. Dude, that's crazy. So you have this major thunderstorm that rolls through your area over a 2-day period in 2013. Dude, hit me. What do you got?
Yeah, so that's part of that's like earlier I was talking about, we get a kind of a 2-pronged monsoon season. We get it in the spring and we get it in the fall. And that was, we tend to have a lot of floods around Halloween, oddly enough, and Thanksgiving. We have these big flood events. And so I think I was just lucky enough to be on duty that day and be lumped in with the award because I came in on the morning and everybody had been out all night rescuing folks. So both aircraft that were available that day were out and they were rescuing people, and they've been, doing real, technically difficult rescues, out of windows, people all in trees, on the roof of their cars. I think,
wow.
Hey, this was bad enough. I think there were some homes that were kind of flooded and swept away. And so they're out doing their work. And so at the time, this was after, in 2011, 2010, we had some pretty significant wildland fires and burned a lot of homes. So we purchased a Super Huey to do some wildland fire stuff. And so I managed to get into work that morning, and it was, the storm was kind of passing through, and I was all, like, I want to go rescue folks. Where's my helicopter? And they were both out still doing stuff. And I'm like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they said, well, we're going to put you on the Huey. And I was like, well, there's no hoist on the Huey. The Huey's, we had it rigged for firefighting. We didn't have any hoist provisions on it. And they're like, well, we'll give you a couple rescuers. And what we'll do is, you can go out and then, if there's neighborhoods that you can just land in and get people who are cut off and move. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to do that. That didn't sound like, I want to be a hero. Heroes don't just land. I got to do something. So we thought about it for a while, and I was listening to dispatch. There's all this stuff going on, and then I thought back to those 412 short hauling days, and so I asked the boss who was there at the time, and I said, hey, can we build a short haul for the Huey? Can we short haul folks? And he thought about it for a second. He said, yeah, we can do that. So we run out there and we build this short haul. Attach it to the cargo hook on the van. rig it up. So there's 2 points of attachment. We got it all set up, and we go out and they give me 2 rescuers. I'm like, all right. And the first thing they do is they tell us to go to this neighborhood that's all flooded, basically to deliver. They were concerned. This was kind of after the Hurricane Katrina thing, right? So there was some concern that there may be some people trapped in their roof. And so we were going to fly out there and mainly just move some equipment around so that if that happened, that we were prepared to, cut a hole in the roof and get folks out. And so on the way there, we get a call and they say, hey, never mind, we're going to divert you to this call. The Travis County Sheriff's officer has called and said he's stuck in the back of this pickup with about 7, 8, 10 people or something like that. That they need. Yeah. So I was like, okay. So we fly around and we come back, and sure enough, we find this truck, and yeah, the water's kind of up over the hood. And there's a family and some folks sitting in the back of this pickup truck, and the sheriff's officer standing there. And I'm like, yeah, there's a bunch of folks there. So we recon the area and we talk about it. And this is one of those things where, in your head, you always what you're supposed to do. You prep for this kind of situation, and then you go out and I probably did exactly the wrong thing in terms of I was the most inefficient rescue you could be. Like, instead of I'm set down and we're going to do all this, I was like, let me find the most inefficient way to do this. And so that's what I did. So we land and we put a guy on the end of the line, and we haul him, and he's got, we called it a spider rig. It's a big O-ring, and it's got 6 attachment points to it. And so we had the ability to take 6 people at a time off of the truck. And so we're like, we only have to do this in a couple of trips. And in retrospect, what I should have done was put him down there with enough stuff that he could have got everybody hooked up and ready, that I could have come in, grabbed them, moved them, set them down, come back, grabbed them, moved them, and not made him work, 80 feet below a hovering Huey. It's blowing stuff all over the place. But that's not what I did. So we put him in the back of the truck and then just sat there over the top of him. And he had to, work, and his equipment's blowing around. And so we pick him up and then pick everybody up and short haul him over and set him down on dry ground. And then for some reason, I didn't just give him a brand new set of harnesses to do it. I made him repack all of them and short hauled him back over. So in the end, it worked out pretty well. There was a picture. It was pretty cool. The last people to go out were the sheriff's officers. And there used to be I think I still have it somewhere, a picture of us short hauling the sheriff's officers, and he didn't want to leave his firearm, his shotgun in the back. So it's hanging off of him. And so they took the picture right as he must have spun just right. And so this picture of this guy flying through the air and his shotgun's hanging out, and you could clearly see. And so people are like, what are y'all doing? It's really not what it seems. I get it. His vehicle was swamped. He didn't want to leave it in the back of his thing. Wow. And it's funny too, is my buddy didn't know it. I didn't realize it until we were halfway through it, is that the family brought all their pets. And so they were all wearing backpacks, and he was like, hey, try to do it. And halfway through the short haul, on one of them, this head pops out of the backpack, and everybody's backpack was full of small dogs. And so all these dogs in the back looking around. I just thought it was funny, because I asked him later, I was like, did you know they all had dogs? He's like, what are you talking about? It's like, everybody's backpack was full of a dog. He's like, I was wondering why they wouldn't get rid of their bags. I was like, yeah, it's because they had their dogs in it.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
It's pretty funny. So, I was fortunate enough to be lumped in and be allowed to receive that award, but really it was the rest of the folks from STARFlight who were out really doing some pretty technical rescue work that night. And I came in and really I laugh about it, because it worked out, and no one got hurt, but it was probably inefficient. It really it was interesting to me, because it was one of those things is you look back, and we had talked about doing that exact scenario. Like, what if we have to move a large group of people? We had that spider rig specifically for doing that, and we had talked about kind of doing a round robin of setting you down with all the equipment and getting the aircraft out of the way, let you get everybody packaged up, ready to go, and then just bring the line in, grab a group, move them out. The next group's already ready to go, set them down, come back. And so it was in, all that. And when I was done, I thought about it, and I thought, all the things we've talked about, we wrote a procedure for it. We had a plan for it. And then in the heat of the moment, I went and did the most inefficient thing. I hover over, only gave him one set of equipment. And so, I accept the award, and I was very humbled to be included in that. But really, at the end of the day, it was everybody else. I just, when they said who did rescues that day, I think I moved 8 or 9 people. And so I managed to get, was tagged on to the award. And I'm very appreciative of those folks for submitting my name along with everyone else's. But I really think that everybody else who worked that night really did the real work. And I just happened to kind of come along and provide some comedic relief in the end. So, but I'll take it.
I'll take the comic genius story there.
Yeah.
And you know what? And good job to everybody else that was out there and doing it. And for you, I mean, way to give credit where credit is due. I've heard it many times. We're all out there for the same reason, to protect those that are in despair. And, that's what we do.
Like,
right place at the right time, or wrong place at the right time. However you want to talk about it, we're there. So, but
yeah. And those guys, I will say that, some of the stuff and the lessons we learned that night, they learned, it was incredible. They did such good work. And it's those types of moments, like after, sometimes people ask me, like, why are you still doing this? Why are you still here after 2 years of being a flight paramedic? Why are you still here? And I think it's moments like that, that all these people, put aside, it's storming, most of us live in the Austin area. And, I think it's that self-sacrifice or service to others, or whatever the right term for that is that, you're willing to leave your home, which very well could be, being damaged by the flood or something else, to go out and help people you don't know. I mean, I'm sure and over your course of your career, you've done that. Like, we're going out to help people and we don't know them and
Nope.
we don't know anything about them, but you're willing to leave your family behind for a night to go help others. And that's what keeps me coming back, is at times, as a flight paramedic, that's the stuff that, for me really brings it home as to why I'm out there. It's that, servitude, willingness to help others, even if it, comes at a little bit of a personal cost, being in search and rescue, we don't get to schedule like, next Tuesday at, 10 o'clock in the morning, we're going to go out and do a rescue. And then I'll be home in time for dinner. Don't worry about it. Like, it's the thing, it's the search and rescue causes you to, no one knows when it's going to flood, or if you're in public safety and you do a little more than just search and rescue. We don't know when fires are going to start and when you're going to be out fighting fire all day, or if you're in law enforcement, when you're going to have to do something. And then, so that means that at times those people who are out there doing this job, like whether it's us or any of the other programs across the country and world that do search and rescue, it means, you miss the anniversary, sometimes you miss your kid's birthday and stuff, and you're out there doing stuff. I think that's what, at the end of the day, that's what, makes me proud to be part of this community, is this willingness to put aside personal, personal satisfaction, or not satisfaction, but put aside your personal life and go out and help people. And that's what makes it's such a cool community to be a part of, to look around and say, like, we're all out there doing the same thing. And we may not always agree on the right technique or piece of equipment or something like that. But at the end of the day, I think we all agree on what the job is. And that's to go out and help others who have found themselves in a position to where, those of us who are lucky enough to be in, especially helicopter search and rescue, have a very unique set of skills that can maybe help them. And if we don't go help them, there's potentially going to be a bad outcome for those people. And so that's what makes me.
You're spot on with all of that. I've missed birthdays, anniversaries, all sorts of different events and holidays. And, you're like, well, it's part of the job. It's part of the job. So,
yeah. And a big shout out to, like, let me just say to everyone's significant other and kids who understand that, because they suffer too, right? Like,
true
you get
statement.
to go out, and at the end of the day, like, a lot of times they get kind of maybe forgotten in all this, that at the end of the day, like, what allows us to go out and do these things is that you have a great support at home, support, behind the scenes support from a family that understands what you're doing and is willing to accept those sacrifices that you're making because they know what you're doing. So I give a big shout out to everyone's, son, daughter, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, just families across, the world that, understand the sacrifices that are being made so that we can go help complete strangers.
Well said, sir. Well said. I can't agree more. Man, that's awesome. Well, in that case, let me bring you to the next one, because I don't think I can follow up with any other questions.
We'll
We'll
go to the next one.
All right. So now 6 months later, and I kid you not, 6 months later, here you are, April 27th, 2015. You get another Higgins and Langley Swiftwater Rescue Incident Award. Same thing, Travis County STARFlight. And is that second crew? Is that?
Yeah, we were on the second aircraft.
Okay.
So we had 2 aircraft on duty. We were on the second aircraft.
Okay. Got it. So Travis County STARFlight, second crew, Travis County, Texas. And this is honoring the rescue of 2 victims from a dangerous low head dam near Lake Maier, where their boat was capsized on April 27th, 2015. So you guys were given an award for this one too. So run me through it. What happened?
So this one, well, this one's interesting, or maybe interesting's not the world. This one's tough for me because this rescue up at Maier occurred simultaneously as that the primary aircraft had a line of duty death occur. And so this one's a little difficult for me sometimes to talk about. And I'm going to tell you the story. I think some of my friends, depending on, different people know the full story. And so I'll tell you the full story and I'll tell you how I feel about it. And some of it's pretty hard for me at times to think about. But we were staffing our second aircraft, and that aircraft is normally on duty from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And so it was getting close to the end of our duty day, and it had been raining pretty heavy. About, I think, Maier is roughly 120-ish miles northeast of Austin. So it was raining up there, but, we really weren't all that concerned about it because it was 120 miles away roughly. And so we're sitting around the station doing our thing, and a rescue call goes out for someone who fell and needed stuff in we call it the green belt. It's a creek that flows through kind of the center of Austin. It's a very popular climbing and hiking area and stuff. And it kind of runs through the middle of town, and it just has some difficult access. So we do a fair number of hoists over the course of the year out of this area that's kind of right in the middle of an urban area. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic to, know that you're never more than probably a half mile from a house, but it's just such difficult access that the ground search and rescue teams and the fire department and all that will use us sometimes to extricate the patient because it just takes so long to carry them out. So
wow.
Our other aircraft, our primary aircraft, had been dispatched on that call. And so we were listening to the call, like Monday morning quarterbacking is probably search and rescue crews are prone to do.
That's
so
what we
had
do.
the radio on, and we're listening to them talk, and we're kind of sitting around the station, and our duty day is almost over, so we're kind of getting ready to go home, and so we're kind of listening to this rescue, and are they gonna hoist them out? Are they not gonna hoist them out? And we're kind of listening to it, and get a call from our program manager who says, "Hey, I've gotten some reports about this rescue that needs to happen up near Lake Maier. They've tried." Multiple search and swiftwater rescue teams have tried to get these people out, and they can't. I don't have a lot of details. I know it's the end of y'all's day. Do you think you can go? Do you guys feel okay? It's the end of your day. Do you feel like you can go do this? So I went and talked to the pilot and the nurse who was on duty with me that day, and we were both game. And so we said, yeah, we'll go do it. And so we call him up, and he's like, I don't have a whole lot of information. You're going to get dispatched. I'll get it for you, but we know it's far enough away. And we looked and we said, all right, we're going to have to fly to Waco first and get gas, and then we'll go to the rescue. So we knew we had a bit of time to kind of wait and get some more information. So we kind of get all our equipment loaded up in the aircraft, and we take off. And so we're heading towards Waco, and we had kind of low ceilings, but it was one of those low ceilings was very defined. You could see all the way to her horizon, but you could tell there were some low clouds. And we could see, and so we're flying up there and we're talking, and then my phone starts going off, and it starts, and I look and I pull it out.
While you're in the helicopter flying.
Yeah, it goes off, and
yeah. So you're on your way to your case, and
so we're on our way to the case.
Okay.
And my phone starts ringing, and so I look at it, and it's one of the other flight paramedics, and I was like, oh, I wonder why this guy's calling me in the middle of the night. So I click decline, and I'm waiting to get. I keep checking it because I'm waiting to kind of get additional information on this rescue we're going on. And so some other people, I start getting some text messages from some other people just, saying something. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know it's, at the time I didn't know what was going on. And so finally, a good friend of mine and I didn't ask him if I could say his name, but I'm gonna say his name anyway.
Right.
So this guy, Lynn Burchell, who, by the way, if you ever want to do any Swiftwater stuff, you should learn from Lynn because he's just stellar. He texts me and says something, and he had left Starflight. He had worked at Starflight, and he had gone on, and he was working for doing training and stuff, teaching Swiftwater for the Department of Public Safety. And I knew that we had gotten this call kind of through that route. It had gone from, I think, either a state trooper on scene or parks and wildlife guys on scene or something. So I thought maybe he had additional information. So he sends me this text and he says, "What, you going on that rescue?" And I said, "Well, yes." And so I was like, "Oh, you may have some additional information." So I text him back and he says, "What's going on?" And I said, "I don't know." And so we have this text exchange, and it goes on for a couple of minutes, and he's like, he won't tell me, I won't tell you. And so I think on both sides of the story, like, he thinks I'm playing coy and I'm not telling him stuff, and I think he's not telling me stuff. And finally I'm like, "Look, man, I'm going to do this rescue. Why don't you tell me what's going on?" And he says, "Well, hey," he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, "It's just my friend." And so I thought it was his friend he was talking about that needed rescue in Mahia. And he's like, "I just want to know what's going on." And so all of a sudden,
and you don't actually know what's going on with the other aircraft.
That point, I think at that point we knew that a boat was trapped on the river, and there were some people in the boat, and that's about the extent of what we knew we were going to do. And so, and so I thought when he said "my friend," I thought it was something in the boat, and so I thought he's talking about like that. And I'm like, "Well, tell me what you know about this, so I can start kind of thinking about how I'm going to execute this rescue." And then at some point in there, we have this realization, I think, that neither of us are talking about the same thing. We're holding a conversation. I'm talking about going to this rescue at Lake Mahia, and he's talking about what's happened back in Austin.
Yeah.
And so finally, and this, I say finally, it's not like we were sending this long, complicated. This probably occurs over a minute and a half, 2 minutes maybe, and we're flying up to the Waco airport to get gas. And he finally says, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I'm talking about going to Lake Mahia to do this rescue. What are you talking about?" And that's when he tells me, he says, "I'm sorry, I thought you were going to help Starflight 1. I said, "No, they're doing this rescue." And he's like, "No." He tells me that there'd been an incident on the accident, and that Kristen McLean had fallen from the hoist while they were doing a hoist.
Holy cow.
And then, there's this, oh my God moment. And I'm kind of stunned for a second. And so then I ask, "Is everything okay? Is she okay? Is she just hurt?" And he says, "I don't know if I should tell you right now," which in and of itself is kind of an answer.
Right. Of course.
And that question, then all of a sudden it starts to make sense. Why is my phone, like you can see, on your phone, you get 27 unread, text messages are popping up in the corner and stuff like that. And phone just ringing and ringing and ringing. And so finally he tells me, he says, "I don't think she survived the fall."
Oh my gosh.
So we're flying, and all of a sudden, like, no one else in the aircraft knows what's going on. And I'm sure there'd be some people out there. I struggle. And to this day, I still, like, at times that when I think about this night and this rescue, I struggle with, did I do the right thing? And so, I'll tell you what I did. And there's a handful of people who think like, "Yeah, you did." And it's, to this day, it still bothers me. Like, I said, "Okay, we got these people who need to be rescued. Do I just go do the mission, or do we just turn around and go home and shut it down?" Because nobody else in the aircraft knows. And so
wow.
I kind of,
what a burden for you to carry all the way to a rescue.
So
Steph,
we
holy shit.
I said, "I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to get to the airport. We're going to land. That way," at least in my head, I thought the best plan is to get to the airport. We'll either stay there, we'll tell everybody, we'll find out what happened, as much as we can, in the early stages, and we won't do the rescue. We'll just be done, and we'll just stay there. At least if we're all too upset, we won't fly a helicopter back, right?
Agreed.
And so we land, and I call the boss on the phone, and I lied. And I told him I didn't know what had happened. And that I just knew something bad had happened back home. And I said, "Do you want us to go do this rescue, or do you want us to just stay here?" And he said, well, does everybody else know? And I said, no, I don't think they do. And he said, do you think you can go do this? And I said, yeah, I think I can go do this. And he said, if you think you can go do it, go do it. And I said, okay. So I spent a great deal of time trying to make sure no one had access to their phones, you know, in the 10, 15 minutes it took us to go get gas. And so, you know, I know it's probably, you know, it's hard. Wasn't in the military. And so, you know, we're civilians, right? We're a civilian rescue organization. We don't deal with a lot of line of duty death. So it's not like military guys who know that, you know, this happens sometimes. Like, you know, sometimes people are going to be killed in action or something, but we still have a job to do and stuff. And so I struggled. Like to this day, I still struggle. And it took me a long time. I ended up, you know, trying to come to terms with, am I a bad person because I didn't fall to pieces immediately hearing this? And what do I do? And I you know, I still don't know that I have the right answer on it. I mean, I made the decision I made at the time, and I don't know what I would do if I was faced with that again. I know it was really hard for me. Like I said, to you know, how do I put this out of my mind long enough to go help these people? Because I knew that they were these people we were going to rescue, who I don't know, are in a bad spot, because it was one of those, they were fishing on the lake, or they're doing something on the lake, and the lake has a spillway, and their boat had gotten too close to the spillway. So they'd gone over the spillway, and it had gotten wedged up on some rocks or a tree or something. And this was the first fire department gets there with their Swiftwater team, and they look at this problem and they say, we can't solve it. So they call another team, and they show up and they say, no, this is beyond us. And so we're in the decision tree. We were probably, you know, like the last ditch. Like, they called, you know, 4 or 5 departments to go out there and try and solve this problem. And they didn't. It was too dangerous for them to put a boat in the water, and there weren't any other helicopters available or something. So it was us. And so, you know, I made a decision that we were going to go, we were going to do this rescue, and I was going to do my best to not think about everything else that was going on. And so we fly out there, we get gas, and we fly out there, and sure enough, in the middle of this, you know, creek that probably is normally about, I don't know, 20, 30 yards wide, was probably 400 yards wide. And there's water going through the trees. And sure enough, right in the middle, there's this boat, and there's a couple people clustered on the boat. And so we look at it and we said, all right, well, the rescue portion doesn't look like it's going to be that bad. We do a little recon, and there's some power lines, you know, kind of upstream and downstream. We looked at it, and you could see where the river normally, or the creek outflow normally goes. And there's all these trees. And so we said, all right, we're going to do it. But then we thought, this is, you know, one of those things is, at the time, we were both a hoist and a short haul program. So we had a hoist, but we also still did short haul. And we kind of left it up to the crew to make a decision when you get there, what you think the best means is. And for the most part, hoist was our primary extraction. And so we thought about it. And then we look at these people and we said, well, they're in a boat, boats float. What's going to happen when we start taking weight out of the boat? Is the boat going to become more buoyant? Is it going to unanchor the boat? And so we rescue the first person, but then the boat floats down the river, and we make a worse problem, right? And so we thought about it for a second, and I said, you know, I think what the best plan is we're just going to take everybody all at once. So we're not going to hoist them, because that'd be 3 or 4 people, or I guess 3 on the end of the hoist. And that's probably, you know, I know that's going to exceed 550 pounds of hoist, right? And so I said, well, short haul, because I know at that point we can certainly take the weight and all that. And I said, well, just take everybody all at once. So we go and we land and put the rescuer onto the end of the thing, get all the weirs in the quick strop, get everybody get him set up with a couple of quick strops, and then lift off and fly in. And there used to be video. I couldn't have planned it better. Like, it's just one of those things when you look back at it. We come in and it looks like I planned to do this. So we get him just 2 or 3 feet above the water, and we come approaching the boat, and it's literally like he comes in and just takes 2 steps and he's on the boat. Like from the side view, it looked like, and I couldn't do that again if I tried. Like, it just looked perfect.
Nice.
He gets in, and, you know, he gets these 2 people in the strop, and we're able to lift him out, and we go set him down on the bank, and they're able to go, you know, be reunited with their family. And at that point, you know, everything was done. We flew back to the Waco airport, you know, and it was then that, you know, got a hotel room. At that point, it was tired. Everybody's exhausted. I don't remember. It's hours later. It's probably, after midnight, close to 1 a.m. at that point. And so we said, like, we're not going home. We'll just leave. We'll park the aircraft at the airport. We'll go get a hotel room. We'll spend the night here. And it was at that point that I called the boss, and he said, let me know when everybody's at the hotel and y'all are settled in, and we'll do a conference call, and I'll tell everybody what happened. And I said, okay. And so that we did. And that's when they let everything in. And, there was a lot of stuff, looking back at that I still, was that the right decision? Was it not? Should I have gone on that rescue? Should I have helped those people, or should I have just told them, hey, I'm dealing with my own stuff. You'll figure, maybe the water will go down. Maybe you'll float downstream. I don't know. But I didn't. And, I'd like to think that at the end of the day that Kristen would have made the same decision, or would have been happy with my decision. At least that's what I tell myself.
Yeah.
It's tough. I don't know. Like I said, it made me for a long time, like, I didn't tell anybody this. I kind of kept it to myself, but I felt like I was just a bad person because I went and did this knowing what had happened back home. And it was tough. I got to tell you, I know I've said that a couple of times, but it was a really hard decision. And I don't remember, I don't remember how, or I can remember kind of thinking like, how do you justify this? I don't have a good answer. And so if anybody asks, like, what do you do in that situation? It's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know, like, if there's, I don't know what they tell you if you're in the Army or in the military forces. They tell you, like, if you're doing something and there's a casualty, what do you do? How do you keep going on the mission? Like, I'm a chucklehead paramedic, right? Like, we don't expect that kind of thing to happen,
right?
In the civilian world for the most part. And so when it did, I was really didn't really have the tools or skills or anything to kind of, how do I process this? And so I did the best I could at the moment. And, maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, but those two people were, got rescued, and fortunately they got to go home to their family and stuff. And, which kind of left me and the rest of the guys to kind of deal with things. So.
Wow. Like, there's so much from that. One, great job on the rescue. Smart move, just in your description of where the boat is and how you're going to pluck everybody off. And, to go in there, a lot of people have talked to me about, when you have an incident or something happens, that you have to be able to compartmentalize all of that. So you have to take things and you have to say, okay, this is what I'm going to deal with right now. I will deal with this later. I'm going to compartmentalize this and this. And that's exactly what you did. You know what? If I was in that situation, I don't know what I would do either. I cannot tell you if you made a right or wrong decision, and I'm sorry that I can't. I think you made the best decision based on the information you had at hand, and you did what you thought was right. I don't think anybody should fault you for that.
I know there's no way for anyone to tell you, like, people can say, like, at the time you may have made the right decision, and I think it's a personal thing. Like, I have to be willing to, to my own, you have to be willing to accept yourself or forgive yourself for the things you do. And that's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard thing to get over and think about. And I hope, everybody listening to this, I hope you're never faced with that situation of what do you do when you're doing a mountain rescue or something and one of your teammates, has a fatal accident or has a, serious injury and you're faced with that. I don't know how to tell you what to do. Like, I could just, you listen to this is what I did, and this is how I managed to get through that rescue. Yeah. I don't know that would work for anyone else. And I hope no one else ever has to find out. So, yeah.
Wow. Oh, thanks for sharing that one. Holy cow.
Yeah, it does bring the mood down a little bit. I think it was good, in the end. I think it, as I think about and as I move forward and when I train people now, I think about that. And I don't always share that story or in many parts of that story with people because some of it is still bothers me internally. But I use some of the things that I learned that night as a way to, in my head, I think about things to teach people and talk about. And so it's, I use kind of that example of you get there and you don't know what's going to happen. You have to figure something out on the fly. Well, the only reason I was able to, that it went fairly quickly and I was like, well, we'll just take two, is I had kind of thought about that kind of thing in the past. Texas has had over the years a number of high profile, I think it was in Junction years ago, where we have multiple people stuck in a swiftwater flood. You got 10 people in the back of a car, or that the rescue I did 6 months earlier, like, do we take everybody?
Right.
I was taking a bunch of people at the same time. So in my head, I kind of already had that planned out, and it served me well that night to say, like, to get there and be like, okay, let's just take everybody all at once. Like, we all kind of agree that, if we take, they're adults, if we take, 200 pounds of adult out of a boat that's, floating wedged up against rocks, does that mean that it's more likely to float away? And we thought yes. And so we said, well, let's just take everybody all at once and just be done with it. And one maneuver versus, two. And so it was because I had thought about that stuff. So.
Yeah, that is a great idea. And you have the capability and option to do that. Some helicopter agencies don't have that. I don't have the option to choose between short haul and hoist. It's you're going to hoist. That's what I have. So, and you're right. You can't pick up 3 people because that over exceeds the limit of the hoist. The next thing you know, you're out of business. So yeah, you have to go 1 or 2 at a time. So.
And now I'm like you. In our new aircraft in the 169, we don't do short haul anymore. So I think, like, what would I do in that situation? What would you do if you had 3 people? And this is one of those things that I think is really important for all of us to do, and especially anybody who's new to rescue. Trying to sort that out with the lightning and the rain and the alligators and all that other stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
In my opinion, trying to pioneer a new technique is never a good idea in the middle of all that happening.
Totally agree.
I think it's one of those things, like, when you get new people and stuff, and I tell all the people I train, is like, the time to think about that stuff is today. Right now in Central Texas, the sun is shining. There's not a cloud in the sky, and it's 65 degrees, and it's a Chamber of Commerce day, and it's beautiful. And so now's the day to sit around with your crew and say, they're building a lot of stuff for high rises around here. And what would we do if that guy in the crane operator 200 feet above the ground suddenly had a heart attack? What's the best way to get him off that crane back down to the ground? Right. So what would we do if, and so now's the time to think about that, and at least have a plan or have thought about that, and then go ask, reach out and ask somebody, like, hey, have you guys ever thought about this? And so asking, me calling you up and saying, like, hey, have you ever had this? And what would you do if you had to have this problem? And I think that's the best thing any program can do, which is, one, talk to your tenured personnel, your seasoned personnel who come from maybe another organization who work for you, and ask their opinion, but reach out and, like, don't be embarrassed. Don't be shy. Don't think like, hey, if I have to go ask, anybody, like, how would I do this? If I go, call up some other agency and say, like, hey, what do y'all do this? Doesn't mean that your agency doesn't know what they're doing. That's the way we all get better. And
agreed.
There's 1,000 or many ways to skin a cat, right?
Yeah.
And so calling up and asking, and that's why I think it's really important, when we have conferences or we get together every once in a while and we get a chance to talk, or if you have connections at other programs, you can email out and talk to those people. Like, that's the way to do it. Like, being a program that stands in isolation, and if you want to do that, that's fine. Whatever choice you choose to make, but collectively, we're so much stronger as a community collectively than we are as individuals.
Very much so. Yeah.
And, there's so much we can learn, and maybe your piece of equipment doesn't work in my aircraft, but that doesn't mean that I don't understand, like, what you're doing. I can think, like, yeah, we can't do that, but maybe we could do. And sometimes the conversation you start having isn't where you finish up. And that's okay. I think about that sometimes when we start talking about, hey, maybe we want to do X. And I start thinking about that. And by the time we're done, we've forgotten completely about whatever procedure or whatever piece of equipment we wanted to buy or something like that. And we somehow stumbled onto a new topic, but we're better because we arrived at that new topic and we do adopt that is, a standard procedure or something like that. So I think it's really important to sit around the station and war game these things out. You know, I spent a lot of time on YouTube at the station searching helicopter rescue to just watch what gets posted and then look at it and ask myself, like, would I do it this way? Or would I not do it that way? And if I did, not just to say, oh, I think, you know, they did a bad job, but to say, like, why do I think, like, you know, is it just that it's not my way and so it can't be right? Or is it, do I see something in there that I think is, you know, that I felt is fundamentally unsafe or wrong? So I spent a lot of time, you know, surfing YouTube for that, because I think it's a great way for people to kind of learn and expand their knowledge and see that, you know, we teach a certain procedure, a certain technique here at Travis County STARFlight, but that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. Agreed. It just means that's when we mitigate risk. And I look at this and I tell people, like, I don't know, at least in my mind, there's no 100% safe way to do a hoist short of never leaving the ground.
True statement.
So all of the things, whether you're a dynamic hoisting program or you're a static hoisting program, and whether you always use taglines or you never use taglines, your organization somehow is mitigating risk through everything you do. And the way you do it may be different the way. And so you accept certain risks by doing a certain procedure because you mitigate these other ones. Well, in our RSC, we may be 180 degrees out. We may say that, well, I understand why you're doing that. We think that this is more dangerous than that. And so we have chosen to not use taglines because of the risk of whatever. And we chose to do this instead. And I think it's important for people to look out there and understand, you know, that as we go through this and we learn from other people and we look at this, to say, like, I understand we've accepted that, you know, this risk because it eliminates, or we think it minimizes these other risks. But understand that somebody could very well come back. It's, you know, it's kind of like asking pilots, what's the best way to take off? And you can ask 6 pilots, you know, the same question and come up with 14 different answers. So, I mean,
it depends on this. And then it depends on this. Well, then it depends on this. So,
yeah. And we like to use a tagline because it, like, okay, but we don't, you know, like, oh, you know, the folks that like dynamic is the only way to do hoisting. I was like, well, I think dynamic's a great way to do hoisting, but I don't think it's the only way to do hoisting. I think there's situations where you can't do dynamic. And so you need to be able, and you need to understand that, you know, the pros and the cons and the benefits and the downside of everything we do. And, you know, we get that through me talking to you at our training, right? And understanding, like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. I see what you're saying on that. We just, you know, that's not, you know, to come together and be able to say, like, without arguing or fighting about it, be able to say, like, you know, I understand that. We just choose to do it a different way, or that's not our technique. That's whatever. And, you know, and that's important to be able to learn from somebody. You know, that's where programs get stale. I think that's where they get potentially dangerous, is when we say, like, this is our way to do it. And we're not open to the suggestion that maybe there's a better way, or maybe I could learn something from another program. So,
yeah. Well, you made a great point there. And the fact that you just said it's your technique, there are a lot of techniques out there as to how to hoist. And there's a lot of techniques as to how to long line or short haul. There's, you know, when you're putting gear in, when you're taking gear out, there are so many ways to do it. They're not all wrong. They're not all, or they're just options. You have options, and I love options. I love to have options. You have to have options in order to do each job that you go to. And every hoist is different. Every rescue is different. So, you know, what you did 2 rescues ago may have nothing to do with the rescue you're currently on. At the same time, the rescue you did 2 rescues ago has memory and a crew mentality, and hey, this is how we're going to work through this together. So, but yeah, technique.
Yeah. I think, you know, for us, I like to say, like, we have a standard, right? Like we have protocols, and we say, here's our standard. Like, and the standard is we want to pick up the load. We don't want it to swing more than so many feet, right? We want to be as plumb as possible. How we get to that is a technique, right? So the standard's in the middle, and then we have, you know, left and right side, we have the technique that any of us use to approach that. And, you know, and that technique could be, I like to hold the cable in this hand versus the other people hold the cable in that hand. Well, at the end of the day, that's, you know, technique, not standard, right? Like,
Bingo.
You know, so yeah, you know, that's always important to understand that there's there's just different technique, and that doesn't make it wrong. It just means it's that. So, but yeah, so those are,
wow.
You want to hear? You have time for one more rescue
I got
story?
time for a whole bunch. What are you talking about? Come on.
All right. So I don't want to end on that the story of the accident because it was pretty bad.
Well, can I ask something just before we get into this next rescue? We'll end it on a positive note, but out of the crash or out of the incident that you had, Kristen, you said?
Yes.
What did you guys learn from that to prevent that from happening again? Was it a gear failure? Was it an aircraft issue, a hoist issue? I mean, without going into major details, and I'm not asking for that, because I don't know what's released. I don't want you to cause any problems there. But what did you learn? Like, how do you prevent that again?
So that's a great question, and it's really hard because there is an NTSB report. I think if you Google NTSB Travis County, you probably find it. I think the most difficult thing in all of this is that we don't know. We don't know what caused the accident. Okay. Because at the end of the day, the hoist didn't malfunction, the aircraft didn't malfunction, the hook didn't malfunction, her vest didn't malfunction. And so, I believe, and I think most people would agree, like when you have something happen, you have an accident, whatever it is, the easiest, and I don't mean this, nobody take this that I mean it's easy to get over this, is there's an equipment problem that's somewhat easy to mitigate because you can go and say, we need to buy a better mousetrap, right? Or whatever it is. We need to go buy a better piece of equipment that this failed. When you don't have that, what do you do? And so we did. We went back and, if anybody's ever, their program's had a fatal accident or serious accident, what it's like. All these people show up. There's going to be at some point lawsuits. All these people show up and they look at your program under an electron microscope and they look at every single thing you do and they tell you what's right and they tell you what's wrong. And they start finding stuff and then you're like, oh my God. And so, what it did was it forced us to go back and say, first of all, we can't ever have this happen again. Yeah. And we need to figure out what are we going to do to kind of prevent this from happening? So we went back and instituted some procedures to double check, connections to make sure that this isn't going to happen. And so, we didn't learn, unfortunately, that's probably not the right way to say it. We didn't learn, that we bought the wrong equipment. We didn't learn that, we had a non-locking carabiner in the wrong place. We didn't learn anything like that. What we learned was that there may have been some human error involved. I don't know that for sure. I don't think anybody knows because at the end of the day, we don't have an answer. We don't know what happened.
Wow. Okay.
And probably over the years, everyone who works at STARFlight has speculated on what they think happened. But we don't know. And so, it's pretty hard to say, fix this problem, but nobody knows what the problem is. We just know that we had a bad outcome.
That's tough.
But we don't know how to solve the problem. And, and so that was hard. It really is. And I think, people, we all had to look in and say like, man, like, how am I still comfortable doing this? It puts me at risk, it puts my family at risk because, without me, what are they gonna do? And I think, there were some, very heavy moments there for everybody at the program to sit back and think like, what am I doing here? And is search and rescue really for me? And there's nothing wrong with if you say it's not. Like rescue's not for everyone, right? So right. It's not the end of the world. And I think, for us, that was, what we learned was, there was a couple of things we could change. And we've made some procedural changes largely and stuff, but, it was hard because in the end, we don't know what happened. And that's just, I think, that's hard because you go back and you think, and then you're, well, maybe this and no, well, and then you think you're like, oh, could it have been some 1 in a billion equipment failure that when it failed in such a way that it looks perfectly serviceable and you could put it back in use tomorrow and no one would ever know it was involved in an accident. But no, and so I think that's the hard thing is just not knowing.
Wow. Well, again, thank you for sharing that. It's much appreciated.
I hope somebody can gain something from that. And I hope, people understand it was a really hard time for us, and judge if you will, but until you're in that position, it's a tough thing to say. Like, I would never have done that. I just would have done X. And if you know how you're going to react when something horrible happens to your program, or you're involved in that, then more power to you. I didn't know. And I'm, unfortunately, I had never even, I knew that rescue was dangerous, but I had never allowed myself to think like we're ever going to have something like that happen. And so I didn't war game it. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I made it up on the fly. So,
right.
And I did what I did on the fly. And I say that's not the right way to do things. And it probably wasn't, but I had never allowed myself to ever possibly think that anybody could get hurt, that we were just, it was never going to happen. We were just going to always, triumph. And turns out I was wrong. So anyway.
Wow. Well, spin this, baby. Spin it to, give me a positive. What?
All right.
Give me this rescue.
In every organization, you got to have some policies named after you. Because
I love it. It's great when a story starts like that.
Yeah. So this rescue, they were two of my really good friends and the pilot. And so that day, the pilot was this guy, he's now our director of aviation operations. At the time, he was just a line staff guy with us. And so his name was Craig Hilsendagger. And then we were training a new nurse, and this was like on a Sunday, I think. And at some point in training, one day you're a trainee and the next day you're not, right? And so we had to make a decision. And so Sunday, we had 3 people on the aircraft. Jen is a trainee. On Monday, it's just me and her, and we're going forth. And so we had 3 people. So we had Craig, Jen, and a good friend of mine who just retired from STARFlight, Howard. And so we get dispatched on a high angle rescue or a technical rescue out at Enchanted Rock, which is a giant granite dome, about 65 miles kind of west of Austin. Popular hiking area, very beautiful. It's this giant granite dome. It's the largest granite dome in this part of the United States, or something like that. And this is great. You hike up to the top. It's got stunning views. But it's over the years, parts of this rock have kind of fallen off. And there's some rubble piles, and those rubble piles we call them caves, but I guess they're really just, throw a bunch of rocks down in this hollow voids, and people go crawling through them. So
that's not really a cave. Down. I don't know what you're thinking down there in Austin, but that's not really a cave.
We have a lot of caves, so we do have some caves, actual limestone, water.
Just checking.
Yeah. But this is actually just a rubble pile, and there's some void spaces, and people go crawl through the void spaces. And it's pretty cool. And so we fly out there and we land, and we and there's not the usual amount of response vehicles there, which I thought was kind of odd. But at the moment, I didn't know anything. And so we see them, and we get radio contact, and they say hey, she's still down in the crevasse or the cave or whatever. And we're all right. So we found a spot where we could safely land the helicopter. So we go land, and the 3 of us go traipsing down there, and hey, what's going on? And they said, she's down there, and they point to this 3 or 4 foot opening that drops down about 20 feet, and then it's kind of spreads out in different directions and stuff. They're like, she's down there. And I was like, okay. I'm like, when are y'all bringing her out? And the park ranger and a couple of fire or first responder folks that were there all turned and looked at me and said, as soon as you get her out. And I'm like, I'm looking at myself I'm looking around maybe somebody showed up behind me, and no, they're not. And so I'm standing there, and this is where I do think that at the end of the day, if your helicopter rescue team has the ability to have your fingers, there's certainly no way, at least in my mind, we gave it up years ago trying to be proficient in high angle rescue and helicopter rescue and ground-based swiftwater techniques and all this stuff, and said, you know what, you just can't, it's that skill set is it's technical, it advances and stuff. So we stopped doing that. But people like me who'd done it in the past kind of had a background. It still had some skills and still knew some stuff. And we, at the time, still participated in some high angle type stuff. And so I said, all right. And said, all right, well, okay, fine. I guess I'm figured it out. So I go up to the aircraft, and we had some gear because we still said, like, look, we need to be able to maybe make access. If we couldn't hoist to somebody, we had, you could rappel down or we could lower somebody down. We had some basic technical rope rescue gear in the aircraft. And I said, all right. And the responders had some stuff. So they kind of cobbled this little pile of stuff together. And I look at it. I'm like, all right, well, I know I can get you down there. So set this stuff up and send the first guy down into the hole to start some patient care. And then all this stuff comes up. And the whole time I'm thinking, what am I going to do? How are we getting this lady out of here? And so I'm looking at the stuff and I'm thinking like, oh, well, I can build a hull. I like looking, we got like one pulley and some other stuff. I'm like, all right, there's enough bystanders and stuff. Like I'm not lacking for muscle. What I'm lacking is somebody besides me who really understands technical rescue. And so I'm like, all right, we're going to keep this simple. We're going to build this 3-to-1 hull system and we're going to bring this thing up. And so I'm doing all this. And in the meantime, the pilot's looking at me with this skeptical, like, do you know what you're doing? Look, and I'm looking at him like, I'm about 90% sure of what I'm doing. 80%, 75% sure this is going to work. 50% sure this is going to work. And depending on how so it's funny. So we do all this stuff. And I call the boss. I said, hey, I just want you to know that this patient's stuck down in this hole in Enchanted Rock. And he's like, okay, so we're probably going to be here a little while. And he's like, okay. And they're like, yeah, they got to get her out of this hole. And he's like, okay. And he's just kind of listening to the story like, all right, I get it. Y'all are going to be on scene longer than usual. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And then I was kind of like, oh, yeah, and by the way, I'm building the hull system. There you go, my click. And then let me turn my phone off because I know someone's going to call me back, right? Like,
what did you just say?
Yeah, he said, hey, come again. Well, I'm the most.
You're breaking up. I can't hear
you. I'm the subject matter expert, right? So hang on a second. And he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, all right, I got this. Don't worry about it. So we did. And I built this whole system, and I think it pulled against itself at one point. I think it was like instead of a 3-to-1, I think it was like a 1-to-3 or something like that. It was like, I think I pulled them out in the pot, and it worked. And we really, at the end of the day, we only had to lift this lady like 10 feet. We get her up, and it was difficult getting her over the lip because the litter wanted to turn, and it was hitting rock, and we toiled. I was pouring sweat. And everybody's just dying sweat. Nobody has any water. Like, I think at one point, it was like one tiny little, 16 ounce or 8 ounce bottle of water. And like 5 of us are passing it around and drinking. And I'm like, where? And I keep thinking like I can stall out until the guys that know how to do this, who come out here all the time and do this, will be here. And I'm like, where is everyone? Where is all these other EMS agencies and the fire department stuff? And they're like, oh, there's a big structure fire, a grass fire. They're mutual aid in another county. They can't get here for hours. And I'm like, oh, great.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, I really am stuck on this rock with
Oh
and
my gosh.
Looking at me, and he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, look, I know this is at least safe. And I'm not saying it's the most efficient way. And I'm not even saying it's the best way to do it. I'm pretty sure we can do it. I know we can. So fortunately they got her packaged up and we lift her up. And I just remember it was just took like 5 or 10 minutes to get over the lip, and we get her up there. And fortunately, she was not significantly injured. I even tried. I was like, can't y'all go out the bottom? Isn't there an escape out the bottom? Can you just take her down? And they were like, no. And it's like, oh my God. And so eventually we come up and we get her out, and I'm like, everyone's exhausted. I'm like dripping sweat. And now we still have a hoist to do because she's still up on the side of this thing. We just managed to get her out of the hole onto this little platform. It still has, this giant, you got to walk all the way uphill, and there's no way we're carrying her up this, steep slope, and we can't go down because this boulder rubble pile with all these 10, 20 foot drops. And so we still have to hoist out. So I remember I was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. And I was like, Jen, you're gonna tend the patient. We're gonna come back. And this was, she was still at that point technically a trainee. And the next day she wouldn't. So the nice thing was, and I think it was good for her, was that, and you don't get to do this very often as the hoist operator and stuff. I got to do all of her, stand there while she showed me all of her connections and do all this. I was like, all right, now hold this, and we're gonna go walk back up to the top of this mountain. We're gonna get on this aircraft. We're gonna fly back over here, and don't change anything. You're just gonna hook in there. And so I think it was good because for her, at least this is what I tell myself, is that we were there to help package the patient in the extrication litter, and we were there to verify all her connections and stuff. And then so she had to, for her first rescue, I say it was probably the best possible outcome for a brand new rescue. You've got a crew chief, you got your crew chief and your pilot there who are watching everything. You say, like, this is hooked up, you've done everything right, you're good to go. All you got to do is, when the hook comes, is connect the hook to this ring, and away you go. And so we did. And so we go up there and we pick her up and we hoist her out and we go set her down. And the patient ends up going by private vehicle or maybe ambulance to the hospital, because all she had was a broken ankle or something, and she just couldn't walk on it. And so, but then we go back up and we land and all this, and she's down there, and we go back and we're exhausted. Everybody's tired. And I remember standing at the edge of the hole, looking down, and Howard's in the hole. And so they've done the rescue and all stuff. And he looks up at us and he goes, sticks his arms up, waves up at me, and he's like, "Get me out." And at that point I had enough. And I was like, "Get yourself out." Like, he's like, "Haul me out." And I was like, "Haul yourself out." Like, you've been standing, like, it's 120 degrees on the side of this rock. We're all dying. And he's like, "It's kind of hot down in this cave." And I was like, "You lying. It's not hot down there. You don't even look like you're sweating." And I remember, like, the pilot was just laughing. And we're standing, like, I almost wanted to. It's like, I'm looking down this hole, and Howard's down there, and he's looking up at me. And all these people are kind of staring down. And I'm like, "Crawl out." And he's like, "I can't." And I'm like, "Fine." So we go take the inefficient haul system. We lower it back down. And unfortunately, it was much easier to haul him out. But I just remember, like, the look on my face and the pilot's face when he was like, "Haul me out." And we were both like, "What do you haul you out?" Like, one of us has been sitting in the shade. You didn't do anything.
Oh,
like,
my gosh.
And the rest of us are up here, like, toiling in the sun. What do you haul you out? Go give me a glass of water. Why don't you go do that? Like, so, and so the funny part is, so that all that comes out, and in the end, no one got hurt. We didn't break anything. It worked out pretty well. And so we go back and I tell the story, and, the bosses are looking at me and they're like, "Hang on a second. You did what? How did you build that?" And I'm like, telling them, I'm like, "Well, I had one pulley in this, and I used 2 prusiks to, we didn't have a rescue sender or, any sort of progress capturing device. So I put 2 prusiks on here. I did this, kind of tell them what I did and how I built it, and all this other stuff." And they looked at me, and like the next day a memo came out that said, "Thou shalt not actively participate in high angle rescue." It was like, that's done. We're not doing that anymore. They took all the stuff off the aircraft, and they're like, no more high. So,
hey, well done.
Yeah, it was kind of funny at the time. Now, enough time has passed that I think, you can look back and you can chuckle about it and stuff. But it was pretty entertaining at the time, thinking, like, you got to have a policy named after you. We are rescinding that policy. We've decided that probably, they ought to have, while you're still not allowed to build a haul system or anything like that, but you probably ought to at least have some working knowledge of how all that stuff works. So we're going to start sending all our folks back to kind of a rope rescue awareness course, so that
nice.
We've had a couple of other instances over the years where, the patient was in an area that we couldn't directly hoist to, but they still wanted us to go down and provide some medical care. And so they get lowered down by the departments that's there. And so we felt like it's probably, asking you to put yourself on a system or do something that you don't know anything about. You should at least have some baseline knowledge to be able to say, "Yeah, I can see that that's safe. And yes, they tied the right knot and they're lowering me down, and I understand how all this works." So we're moving back, but we're still not allowed to build haul systems. So I guess my legacy lives on, and that you're not supposed to be the subject matter expert for a high angle rescue. So,
oh my God, Steph, I love it. That's great. Well, Steph, so, I can't thank you enough for all your time here. I don't want to take up your entire day. So,
I got nothing but time for you, man. But yeah, I get.
Dude, awesome stories. Love it. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome, man. I really appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to seeing you again, in person someday when you get back. Like, we'll all get together again and have the the famed what is it? What did we say we were going to have a Christmas party in
yeah.
San Diego, right? Yeah, so,
I think that's where, if not San Diego, maybe Mexico. I don't know. It was going to be a good spot.
Somewhere like that, yeah. So, I really appreciate you having me on, and
thanks for coming on, man.
I look forward to listening to your podcast, and I'm glad to have been a part of it, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, heck yeah. Again, thank you for coming on.
All right.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Real ResQ podcast. Please take a minute and, like my daughters like to tell me, like and subscribe. Oh yeah. I'm pulling chocks and taking off. But before I go, if anyone out there has a rescue story that they would be willing to share, I would be humbled and honored to have you as a guest. Or if you have any questions about any of the rescues or anything else that we talk about here on this podcast, send me an email, therealresq@gmail.com. That's TheRealResQ@gmail.com. You can also check us out on our Facebook and Instagram page at The Real ResQ. That's at TheRealResQ. I also want to give a special thank you to all of you staying on the watch today. Always remember that when that SAR alarm goes off, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. Until next time, fly safe and swim hard.